Welcome to the Open Society and the EthiSizer. This is a 15-minute paper for the 4th Zoom conference on the thought of Karl Popper. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Jeremy for hosting. So here we have Popper's great book, The Open Society and Its Enemies from 1945, and the EthiSizer. I'm Velikovsky of Newcastle, a PhD in communication, 30 or so years of research and professional practice in communication, author of the book Elements of Evolutionary Culturology, and a member of various organizations. So a brief overview of the next 15 minutes. I'll briefly talk about my background in simulation and video games, among other domains in culture. A brief side note on diagrams versus words as a communication tool. I'll talk a bit about Popper's Open Society and Its Enemies from 1945. That leads into the new meta science of evolutionary culturology, which borrows some of Popper's ideas and applies them scientifically as tools. And finally, that leads into the EthiSizer. So a bit about my background. In the year 2000, I was the National Video Game Market Analyst for Australia, which explains my interest in quantification and qualification. I've been a video game designer, writer, programmer and artist for about 40 years, and the last 10 years I've also been involved in agent-based modeling, and there's more details at those two links. Just a brief note on diagrams versus words. I very much admire this article by Jill Larkin and Herbert Simon, Why a Diagram is Sometimes Worth 10,000 Words, an excellent article from 1987. And the great Brian Boyd, who's writing a biography of Popper for the last 25 years, notes that Popper didn't have a particularly good visual imagination in his own estimation, but of course Popper was brilliant textually and verbally, as we know. But it is interesting to see VARC, learning preferences, visual, oral, read, write and kinesthetic. You can Google VARC learning preferences and do a 30-question quiz and find out which mode you prefer to learn information. I happen to be multimodal. I like all 4 channels of communication there, and it is worth considering communication channels and their different bandwidth or channel capacity. Some are much faster, some are slower. At any rate, just a very useful article and explains why I like to use so many scientific diagrams. So in 1945, Popper published the brilliant The Open Society and Its Enemies, and here is my diagrammatic representation of the key takeaway from that book. The extremes of left and right in political polarity provide closed societies, which can be a constant danger to the open societies, which are more in the center there, the green section of that chart. And as a side note, there's another online quiz, Political Compass, where you can answer 30 questions or so and discover your political orientation. Mine is down there somewhere, apparently, but I did have issues with about half of the questions. I thought they were badly designed. Still, who knows if that's accurate or not? Hard to say. Next. And just as a side note, some other more recent works that agree with Popper. Well, Orwell in the same year as Popper with The Open Society and Its Enemies published Animal Farm, which in the end of the novel, as opposed to the film, which the original version was funded by the CIA, he concludes that these extremes of left and right, the closed societies with tyranny and autocracy, need to be avoided by the free and open societies. And more recently, I worked on a documentary called Better Left Unsaid, directed by Kurt Jamungal. That's worth a look to. It basically communicates the same message that these extremes of left and right, being closed societies, remain a constant threat to open societies of the world. Well worth a look, that online documentary. And so in my short paper for this conference, if you have a chance to read it, I did a data analysis from some data at Our World in Data online, and in a nutshell, around a third of the 180, 190 nations of the world are open societies, or more than 50% open currently, and the other 2/3 of nations in the world are less than 50% open, according to the valuation by the experts on that site. And this is a condensed version of the table with 186 nations and their rankings of the percentage open that these societies are. So Sweden comes in at number 1, 88% open society. Down at number 63 is Lesotho in South Africa at 50% open. And right down the bottom of the list, we have Eritrea, number 186, on 1% open, which basically means 99% closed society in Popper's terms. So if you get a chance to read the paper, have a look at the data table in the appendix, and some of them are quite surprising, really. And from that same website here is a chart where they've graphed it so that in blue are the more open societies and in yellow are the more closed societies. Worth having a look at that website and the different ways they've represented that data. And likewise, the World Press Freedom Index tells a similar sort of story. Worth having a look at that online as well to get some empirical statistics. And so this brings us to EvCult. It's a meta science. So down the bottom here we have individual sciences such as physics, chemistry, biology, etc. And above that we have meta sciences as they apply to all of those sciences below. So system science, because atoms and organisms and biospheres, etc. are systems. Information science is another meta science. Cultural evolution is another, and creativity science is another. So we have down the bottom the individual sciences, then the meta sciences, which apply to all of those below. But EvCult is one level above that. It scientifically reduces systems and units of culture to the scientific unit known as the fractal holon parton, and more in that book, Elements of Evolutionary Culturology. So yes, it's a meta science, and there hasn't really been one before to the best of my knowledge, so an interesting new scientific development. And so there's the book, and this shows the evolutionary culturology worldview as the universe is a system made of smaller systems, or fractal holon partons, and some scientific diagrams of the 3 laws of these units, including physics, chemistry, biology, and culture. And down the bottom there, this means consilience, the unity of knowledge, because we have the same units, levels, evolutionary mechanisms, and 3 laws for all domains now. And there's the book. In there is also my adaptation of Popper's 3 worlds theory to a scientific tool, which is a 4-part taxonomy of all culture. So we can now scientifically categorize all units of culture into one or more of 4 categories, similar to Linnaean taxonomy in biology. And there's also a tree of culture that's within the book, Elements of EvCult, showing how science emerges upwards out of philosophy over time, when we can turn these philosophical questions into empirical questions and solve them using science and resulting in useful scientific tools. And there's more on all that in a paper I gave at a previous one of these great Popper conferences. So there's my paper on that online if anyone missed it or is interested to read more about evolutionary culturology. And so this is just a list of 5 major ethical systems. There are, of course, many more. And there's a cartoon I did about 15 years ago with Dean Taylor. It features Lefty, the robot rights activist, going around collecting door to door for the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Robots. These are all important issues: the ethics of life on Earth, the ethics of human life, and even robot ethics. More there on different types of ethical systems online. And obviously we all face these global wicked problems, such as these and many more. And again, threats from robots taking jobs, etc. So more there on existential or global catastrophic risk. These are all very pressing problems which need to be solved. And of course, the great Karl Popper says science begins with problems, and there's his 4-part schema for science: the old problem, tentative theories, attempts at elimination, and the new problems. And Popper wasn't a big fan of computers, and thanks again to Jeremy for helping me with some Popper references here. Popper was, in 1989, was quite skeptical about the power of computers. Just an interesting side note. And very importantly, in All Life is Problem Solving, Popper states our first objective today must be peace. World peace is a good idea. It's worth imagining what it would be like if all 195 nations cooperated instead of competing and conflicting. For example, wars. It seems bizarre that in this day and age we still face wars such as Russia and Ukraine and the many others going on. World peace is a good value. And here's briefly Popper's humanitarian program he outlined in All Life is Problem Solving. Those 5 great points there are also integrated into the design of the EthiSizer. And so essentially, EvCult gives us this new worldview, the systems view, and it's a top-down and also a bottom-up solution, as many of these bottom-up people-powered solutions are, of course, essential, but over human history they don't seem to have gotten any good results. We're still 1/3 open society and 2/3 closed in the world, so time for a different kind of solution, such as the EthiSizer. And so this is a brief insight into the EthiSizer. There's blog posts online that you can read. Essentially, it's a computer program algorithm that, rather than surveillance capitalism, uses these technologies for good and monitors the ethics of all units, and gives a warning when someone's behaving unethically, and graduated sanctions. So that's just a brief snapshot of the EthiSizer, much more online. and more details online, but initially uh, envisioned as a video game, then a smartphone app to let you know which of your shopping choices are more or less ethical, and finally global deployment to enable a ethical world free of wars and with the aim or goal of minimizing suffering and a whole earth ethic, as the great David Sloan Wilson talks about in his excellent novel Atlas Hugged. And as you may well know, a video game is a simulation. So I've been working in video games for about 40 years now. Here's just one example of a game I worked on about 10 years ago. So in a nutshell, a game is a simulation of the world. So using systems, science, and various algorithms, we can monitor and check the state of the world's ethics at all levels. And likewise, an agent-based model is a simulation, and I created this sim as part of my PhD study. It's just a simulation of the global film industry using NetLogo agent-based modeling. So these are some of the tools that can be employed in the EthiSizer in order to simulate the world and check its ethics, and then of course correct them in the real world. And online there's a World 3 simulator that you can try to see. This is the book that resulted in the Club of Rome's book, Limits to Growth, in 1972. So the EthiSizer is something like that. These world simulators are have been around for many years now. And that's the Open Society and the EthiSizer. And now over to you. The EthiSizer needs input from all 8 billion people on Earth as to what they think would make the most ethical society, and then the algorithms can take it from there and quantify these moral and ethical situations. And thank you so much for listening. I've been Velikovsky of Newcastle.